Well, we can go ahead and get started here. So, Dr. Rettinger, you work you're a professor at, how's it pronounced? Trier University?
Yeah, Trier. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, and maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became involved in AI for good.
Yeah. So I became a professor here about 2 years, no, 1.5 years ago now. I'm a full professor at Trier University. It's a smaller university, but it's the oldest town in Germany. So it's about 2000 years old, Trier. Um, yeah, so the Romans built it, and there are still also Roman buildings here. So the oldest buildings also in Germany is here. It's also about 2000 years old. Um, it's a very nice university. My research focus is here on machine learning, like representation learning. I am a computer scientist by training. Now I'm working in natural language processing. Yeah, what else? I studied of course, in Germany, but also in Georgia, US, in Edmonton, Canada, in Osaka, Japan. I did my PhD at Munich, Technical University of Munich, and then finally, for the last 10 years, like before I came to Trier, I was at Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. It's one of the very largest universities in Germany, like technical universities. And at that time, I also was involved and was also um, leading some big European joint projects. And there's where I met. We had project partners: Michael Wittbrock, Marco Krupelnik, James Hodson. They were all in those research projects, somehow involved, some as advisors or in other ways. And I guess this is where I came involved, and I was on the steering committee from the beginning of the AI for Good Foundation. So, yeah, and this is why I was asked to become a member of the board. And of course, I was very happy to accept the nomination since this is a very important time, I think, and a very important topic. And if you can, uh, yeah, make some impact there in this area, it's very exciting. So I'm quite happy to be involved.
So it really was just random. You just kind of met James and then went from there.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I first met Marco. Through Marco, I met James and Michael Wittbrock, and then yeah, this is how it developed. I guess that's about 10 years ago. I guess something like this that I met them for the first time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, great. And how do you apply your work as an AI researcher to get sustainable development policies?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm since I'm more on the research side, I'm not applying that much, I guess. But I had a couple of German, mostly German, like national projects on manufacturing industry 4.0, and this type of projects where we did a lot of optimization of manufacturing processes. So where it was mostly about reducing the how would you say this, the percentage of deficient products, right? So in the production line, you want to like minimize the number of products that you have to throw away or recycle or something like this. And there we used machine learning algorithms to kind of put a lot of sensors on the manufacturing machines and measure exactly when something goes wrong, and to predict when something goes wrong with the machines, to avoid this kind of situations, or give a very early warning when something goes wrong so that they can like fix the machines. um, so I worked also in this direction a bit, but I guess my at the moment the biggest impact I'm making in this respect is by teaching at the university, mostly because we have seminars on the opportunities and limits of AI technology, and one of the aspects, of course, is also if it's helping sustainability or hurting, and what are the limits and so on. So this is, I guess that's where I mostly have an impact at the
So
moment.
your classes there are about sustainability as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not like we don't have a seminar which says whatever AI and sustainability, but we have some seminars that are on the limitations and also on the more applied. So where should we apply AI technologies in the real world, and where's the benefit and where are some risks? And this is, of course, this is something that we talk about a lot in those seminars. So it's not, we don't have a purely maybe that's also where Trier University, what Trier University is known for. They have mostly a humanities focus, the university. So we are not only having like a purely technical study program. We always mix it with humanities and social sciences. So we have like the standard computer science stuff in our study program, but we also have those seminars where we discuss like broader topics, how there's an impact on society and so on.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's a nice mixture of things and allow students to understand both the humanities, social science side as well as the technical side to
Yeah.
sustainability.
Yeah. So we have a big digital humanities center here at the university. So it's also a lot about like using AI, machine learning, natural language processing for also understanding like older texts, something that a lot of natural language processing researchers are not that much concerned about, and it's a very different way of researching this, because you run into a lot of problems that you don't have in standard natural language processing. So dealing with old texts with a very different languages, and even different writing and different grammar and all this stuff. It's quite interesting. Yeah.
Um, uh, if you could just describe your contribution to Fragile Earth, one of the programs here at AI for Good, and how you believe that AI can be used in preserving this environment.
Yeah. So yeah, so as I said before, um, I believe that AI technologies, of course, they can help specifically in the natural and engineering sciences. So as I said before, manufacturing, logistic, maintenance, quality control, and so on. But my personal perspective is a bit a different one. That I'm more interested in my research is that I think that one of the key factors that is much more important is humans, for kind of taking care of this fragile Earth topic. So in the end, I think the whole sustainability issue can only be dealt with through humans. In the end, we cannot solve this with pure technology, right? I mean, technology is certainly a key factor, but the more important factor is actually the something like the public opinion, or the mindset of humans for dealing with this kind of crisis. Um, so in the end, what I'm mostly interested in is kind of to see if it's possible to have something like a change of our way of living, right? Because this is probably the only thing that will preserve Earth on the long run. And what I'm kind of researching there is human communication. So in my research, at least, so for the last 2 years, I was a lot focusing on how would you say this, like the formation of opinion in societies, and specifically in modern digital media. So what the kind of influencing factors are there, and can we develop machine learning and natural language processing techniques to kind of give more insights in how opinions are formed, and how how what are the roles of like the modern digital platforms where most of the communication nowadays run through, like what is the framework they give you to enable formation of opinion. And I think I think AI can help a lot to understand what's going on there. So since they are the technical frameworks, technical platforms, they can also be analyzed with technical means. And so I guess what are the topics that that mostly what are mostly known in this area where researchers are working on is something like fake news, toxic language, like polarization of those platform mechanisms, filter bubbles, and topics like this.
So you really focus more on the how the public views either the environment sustainability versus AI, and how far it kind of the public wants it to go, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, as I said before, I would say the most important factor to kind of preserve our Earth is the public opinion, and if they really take this serious, if they think this is an important issue, and if they are in the end willing to also change their way of living, if they at some point say, okay, probably maybe our economic system is not very sustainable, right? Do we have to change something there? Do we have to individually change the way of living, how we whatever consume, how much waste we produce, how much energy we consume, and so on? So I don't think we can solve whatever this climate crisis or just by technology. We also have to change, specifically in the Western world. We have to change our way of living to make an impact.
Yeah. And have you looked into how different populations or countries or regions vary in their opinion towards sustainability?
Yeah, so I haven't. And it's also something that I just like I have been studying for a year or two now, so I haven't gone too deep, and I was always just fixating mostly on European countries like Germany and English-speaking countries. And of course, my kind of entry point of research is always like language. So we have to process typically German and English languages, and like I also worked on research projects that were more dealing with analyzing also more European languages that are not that well kind of technically accessible. So in that sense, we did some comparison across countries, also like smaller countries compared to larger countries. But we never did it really with a focus on sustainability or climate change issues or something like this. So that was more fundamental research, I would say, understanding the kind of so what we did a little bit is, for example, investigate if there were some event happening somewhere and it was reported in one country. We analyzed how long it took until it made it into a different language. So it kind of crossed the border to another language, to another country. But we never did this for topics that were on climate change or something like this. So that is definitely something I want to do in the future.
It's a very interesting and specific topic. I'm actually
Mm-hmm.
very interested in and reading more about that.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is actually something we did with Marco and James. What was it? 8 years ago. It's in the like cross-lingual knowledge extraction project. It was a big EU project, and there we tried to analyze this for standard news events. And at that time, this whole sustainability issue was not that big, right? It was it wasn't a big issue. So we were more focusing on, I don't know exactly what it was, some other events that happened. You had some events that were globally important, and then we just tracked all the news that were produced in the different countries and different languages, and we are checking how long it took until this topic showed up in a different place. Right, and this is quite interesting because there's sometimes it just pops up everywhere immediately. It's kind of distributed through this DPA and whatever the different agencies. But sometimes it also happens that you have something like a delay of weeks. If it's not like a news event in the classical sense, it's more like a topic that is of interest. It can take weeks until it crosses into some border, and it's not really clear why and what's the process behind it and why sometimes takes a long time and sometimes it doesn't, right? Yeah, but that's so I wrote a couple of grant proposals now to go more into this direction, also to refine the technologies to really analyze over time how this opinion formation can be tracked. So the interesting thing, even inside one country, so in this case we're dealing with German language inside Germany, and we have, for example, we have some kind of terms that in different parts of society, I would call it, have developed a different meaning, right? So for example, the term folk, so that's like folk, that is in some parts of the society it's more put into a nationalistic context, and in other parts it has a very different meaning, right? So it depends on kind of your political opinion that you have. But the interesting thing is that there is some sort of dynamic that makes it really catch a different meaning over time in different also like media outlets. Right? If you go to the in Germany, we have this big public broadcasting. There you can see that the meaning of a certain terms is pretty stable. So in the sense, meaning is defined by in which context this word appears, right? It stays stable over time. And then you have the more right-wing media that is mostly, we call it alternative news sources. That's some websites and blogs and so on. And there you see like a constant shift where it feels like it's really orchestrated. You see it slowly getting associated with a lot of different terminology, and this is kind of interesting. But we haven't gotten to a point where we can really where this type of analyzing stuff is very stable and where we could do it across languages. But this would be really amazing.
Let's see. And how do you think machine learning can be utilized to meet these sustainability goals? And are you, I guess you should say, how hopeful are you that they can be reached by 2030 or
Yeah.
2050, however long?
Yeah. So I would say machine learning and AI certainly does have an impact. So it can be utilized. Maybe there's two aspects to it. So the one thing, of course, we can use machine learning and AI to kind of understand, so from my perspective, something like communication better. We can understand the formation of opinion better, because this is the only, like, those types of technologies are the only way to get at least some kind of still very shallow level of understanding of what's going on, because that's the only way that allows you to analyze those huge quantities of data, right? So usually in these areas, in those research areas, you more work qualitatively. So you kind of, you have people reading the text, but this is the social networks and media have gotten so quick and fast, and they produce so huge amounts of data that this is just not possible anymore. So I think in this area, using AI technology and machine learning is the only way to get some insights, at least in the scale and speed that this is developing. But there's also a different aspect. So we have to see the other side, right? Because all of the communication that runs through those social networks is very much influenced already by machine learning and AI technologies, like recommendation engines, and they can also have a negative impact, or at least they have an impact on how we communicate. And I think this is also worth looking at, just to see, maybe also find out maybe what are negative impacts of the use of AI and machine learning in this area. So not only what can we do with machine learning, but also maybe what shouldn't we do with machine learning, right?
Uh,
Um, and yeah, and the second part of the question, am I hopeful? So yeah, that's a good question. So I would say, um, I would say a bit more pessimistic at the moment, uh, because uh, I don't know a lot of examples in human history where humankind was good in doing some, let's say, how do you say this, preventive action, right? Where we got now with this global warming and so on, with this issue, we would need to change our way of living and use technology in a responsible way, in a sustainable way, before it's too late. So
yeah,
humans typically they are good at adapting and changing the way of living, but only if they have to. So at the point where everybody is suffering so much from climate change and whatever the impact this has, um, that they are really understanding and willing to, or they're forced to change the way of life, maybe it's already too late. So that's kind of what I'm worried about. On the other hand, I'm also a bit optimistic, because it might sound weird, but at least a lot of people I talk to, they had some kind of change of mind now through this pandemic. A lot of people started thinking about what are, or maybe they got time to think about it, but they said, oh, I during the pandemic I changed my set of values a lot. So I kind of realized the world slowed down a bit, kind of thought about it, and I realized there's maybe some stuff that's more important than always maximizing things, for example, right? Growing stuff, maximizing the profits, or yeah. And so I'm a little bit hopeful that this whole pandemic situation, the awful it is and the cruel it is, it might also change something to the better, or it might accelerate some changes in public opinion.
yeah. And I was thinking about public opinion as well, because a lot of the systems in the world are, at least especially in Western countries, who emit the most pollution. Uh, they're democratic systems, And if public opinion is, not where it needs to be, then these people vote in people who don't really have any urgency to
Mm-hmm.
put in sustainability policies, and therefore nothing gets done anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, somehow we are exactly in those crossroads. So we have this two different paths. So you can see this like in China and this type of part of the world. You could say, okay, maybe the best way is to force people in some sense to deal with this issue. So by imposing rules and kind of controlling the society, so that at some point you could maybe just force people to reduce their consumption of whatever their energy consumption or something like this. Or in the more Western and free, I would call them free societies, um, they are more democratic. You need to change every individual person, right? They need to come to their to a mindset where they say, this is important, I will take political actions or vote or whatever, um, so that everybody, the society is kind of not forced, but there's a political party that kind of makes laws that kind of enforce sustainability goals. um, yeah, so this is kind of the two ways we can go, and I really hope that yeah, we are not too late to change.
Well, let's hope if there's one good thing about this pandemic, let's hope some people at least change enough to see the urgency
Yeah,
in
yeah,
not only
yeah.
their own lives, but also the lives of the people around them.
Hmm. Yeah, so there have been so many changes to your everyday life where you think, maybe I in my life I had a lot of stuff that was not really necessary. So something like traffic went down a lot, air traffic went down a lot, and I would be hopeful that maybe it doesn't go back once the pandemic is under control. It doesn't go back to the same levels, but people then say, okay, I worked in at the home office much more and it still worked out, right? It was not a complete disaster. So maybe they find a middle way where they can say, okay, so I stay at home half of the time and half of the time I work at the office or whatever. So that in the end, the let's say transportation is at least not going back to the levels it was before, right? And this is the best way to preserve the environment and save energy, not but just not consuming that much.
um, and is there any good example of a country or a region that has addressed this at the need that they should?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I know Europe in general tends to have better sustainability policies, but is there really any country you can think of that actually
Yeah. So
has gotten to that level?
yeah, I don't know of any country where they did it really nice. Like really, I would say this is like a role model country. I don't know of any country. Maybe the best ones, as usual, or the most progressive ones are the Scandinavian countries. They are quite strict and have some very high sustainability goals. I guess Germany and Europe also in general, they have, at least on paper now, they have a lot of really big initiatives. So the European Green Deal, right? That's a big thing policy-wise that has been decided. Also now research-wise, there's in the next huge research framework program in Europe, it's called Europe Horizon Europe. There's basically in every also AI, information technology call, there is sustainability is one of the big important topics you need to address. Um, so they are really trying. I'm not sure if it's enough and radical enough in the end? Or is it just like on paper? So I haven't seen, let's say, I haven't seen in no real country, I haven't seen any, let's say, political party that said, we have to tell you the truth. We cannot keep on living like this. So even in Germany, like the Green Party, they wouldn't go out there and say, okay, we increase the cost of fuel a lot, right? Because we cannot continue like this. They never dare to do something like this. And this is kind of why I think there's not like one role model country where they also dare to kind of tell the people it's probably not how we can sustain the way of living. We cannot sustain it like this, and there will be changes, and there will be also cuts to the style of living. So that's something that I would like to see, but I fear no one would vote for this type of party.
Yeah, it's back to our conversation about democracies and kind of how they're a
Yeah.
little bit lacking in this sense of urgency to this type of situation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, in the end, if you have like, if you're giving this choice, in the end, with climate change, we don't have a big choice, right? Either we survive this, the earth doesn't get too hot, we don't get too much societal changes. But if there are two parties, the one party says, oh, everything is staying the same, or even you can grow and you can earn more and you can consume more and so on, then the other one is saying, oh, you have to cut back. Who are you going to vote for?
Yeah, really just in countries too. You have countries that are always trying to compete with each other, just economically speaking, and it obviously presents an issue
Mm-hmm.
when talking about economic growth, trying to grow
Mm-hmm.
while being sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's often, it's not the discussion is not really open in this respect, because also like in this AI and machine learning area, a lot of energy is consumed, right? Specifically deep learning consumes a lot of energy, and this is often not discussed a lot. So there is lots of about like efficient machine learning, right? Reducing the amount of energy that's consumed, building smaller models, less parameters, whatever, all this stuff. That's all fine, but in the end, if you deploy more and more machine learning models on every cell phone and every this and that, uh, in the end, it might not be energy effective, right? Because you're using a lot more machine learning, which consumes energy. Maybe in general, like every instance is a little bit more efficient, but if you have lots more of them, the energy consumption in total is larger in the end. So there's always people are still afraid of saying it's not just about getting whatever machine learning more efficient or production and manufacturing more efficient. It is also about reducing production, or at least keeping it on a level that sustainability. Just more efficient technology will not help if you use more and more of this technology. That's also something that's at least in industry is often not really talked about openly.
Yeah, a little bit scared to talk about it openly.
Yeah.
Um, and what are some limitations to using AI to pursue sustainability?
Yeah, I guess we talked a lot about limitations already. I would say there's for me, AI it's just another technology. So there's always limitations to technologies that always have been there since the Industrial Revolution. So you have to, of course, think about this So as I talked about this efficiency and effectiveness, right? If you, let's say you have self-driving cars and they are a little bit more efficient in the sense they don't consume as much energy because they whatever accelerate that hard anymore and this kind of stuff, where you have electric cars and it's getting more efficient. But in the end, if this also has increases the amount of cars that you can fit on the road and makes traffic more convenient and people use more cars and more cars are built, there you have technology, but it's not effective anymore because in the end, of course, in summation, you have more energy consumed. So we always have to think about this kind of limitations of technologies. Is it really effective? Also, it's not efficient. Is it also effective to use technologies? And if it comes to the specific technology of AI, I guess there's lots of limitations we have to be very careful about, because in the end, AI, at least for me, should be a helpful tool for humans. It should not be used to make decisions for humans, right? Or control the behavior of humans and so on. There's something that is slowly coming kind of to the attention of AI researchers as well. But I guess we need to have more stricter, I'm not sure if it's laws, but at least understandings of what can be done with AI and not. So, because in the end, a lot of the decision making that they are now, let's say, self-driving cars, where this typical example is like, should there be some kind of programming in the car that decides if, in case of an unavoidable accident, if you should hit the kid or the old woman or something like this. This is something that AI should never be programmed to decide, in my opinion. This is just nothing that can be solved with technology at all. It has to be kept to a human to decide, because AI cannot be made responsible for any of the consequences. It's just nothing that AI can decide. So I mean, this is a huge philosophical discussion in the end. So I think you cannot program a universal moral ethics into a AI system. It's always an individual decision, and you need a human to make this decision. Right? That's not something that you can program in any sort of rules, or you cannot program it just by what machine learning would be, just by looking at examples or making it let's say, a democratic decision. In the end, it's an individual decision, because you cannot, the context of a single individual is always different than it is. You cannot see all of those options in front of you as a programmer, what could happen and what are deciding factors and what's the context, right? So this is certainly a very strict ethical restriction AI technology and machine learning should have.
Talking about public opinion towards AI or technology, even now there's a lot of people who say technology is going too far and we should kind of like scale it back and whatever. So how do you increase public support for or public trust towards these technologies, towards sustainability using technology?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess one of the biggest factors in that would be something like explainability. So one of the big problems of AI and machine learning is that it's gotten so complex that even the machine learning engineer often cannot explain a certain decision that was made by a system, right? And this is to me, that's kind of inherent in a proper complex machine learning system. This is something that is part of the system. It cannot give a justification for what it did. And of course, in that cases, it's really hard to build trust in those systems. Um, um, Now, it's a good question if you should scale back those systems to systems that are less complex and that can kind of be tracked and understood how a certain decision was made. I guess in some areas that makes sense to do it. In others, it's probably not that relevant. But that's probably the most important factor, is kind of explainability of how the system works. Also to come to an understanding of what the limits of the system are, right? Because if you're using them in daily life, you kind of start trusting them just by kind of frequency, because you use it so often, you think it's all good, right? But in the end, there could something be happening also in terms of whatever, all that stuff that is in the discussion a lot about, like is the decision of AI system, is it biased, is it ethically correct, is it like is there some racial bias or something like this? And all of this you might not even be aware, because the systems get so complex and they can't deliver any explanations anymore that you wouldn't notice, right? And you just also, you're then, since they are very convenient, you're not used to kind of deliberately think about the decision of the system. Is it a really good decision? Was it made in according to the context very correctly and this stuff? So yeah, it might be that you have to scale back every time you make decisions where humans are involved, to systems that have a better explainability. And then in other cases, for example, so if it's about communication or forming of public opinion, it's probably important to really understand the mechanics of the platforms, of the AI algorithms that are working there underneath. But in stuff like manufacturing or something like this, it's probably not that important, right? You have a measure that you can optimize, and if it's in the end, if the manufacturing is more productive, that's fine. You don't need to think about ethical issues, because there's probably no humans involved, right? As long as, okay, maybe there are humans involved, and then it gets interesting again if they're in the production process and you, for example, you use them to kind of control how they work, like Amazon does, right, with their workers, if they are efficient and how fast they are and how they do this, then it's, again, that's kind of an issue. But as long as you don't, if you just build AI and machine learning for technical systems, then you're kind of on the safer side.
And really just to wrap up here, do you have any more comments or suggestions for sustainability or AI for good?
Yeah, I guess it's time to really put the good more in the focus, because so far it has been mostly about AI in the sense of efficiency and kind of a very economic and market-driven perspective on AI as a technology. And I think we have to shift the focus a lot more to if it's really good for individual humans and humankind in general. And so, yeah, that's why we have the AI for Good Foundation.
That's why you've joined.
Yeah, exactly. At least that's why I joined, right?
Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Rettinger, for
Yeah.
being here and talking to me, and for being a part of AI for Good as well.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a great holiday season. Staying
Thank
safe,
you.
of course.
Yeah. That's a good topic because like now with all the grandparents coming, that's always a difficult issue. So today, so we are now basically in a quite hard lockdown in Germany at the moment, and they said now they had that new. It's not a law, but they recommend that you shouldn't meet anyone from the family,
Well,
which is really tough.
I guess you guys are into London yet.
Yeah. So yeah, they have. Yeah, that's London. Yeah. Maybe that's already like because they started 2 weeks ago. They started with this lockdown, and the numbers are not going down. So they think that it might already be this kind of more contagious version of the virus that we have here. Because the last time we had this type of lockdown, the numbers went down immediately, but now not anymore.
Wow. Well, hopefully these vaccines get out as soon as possible. It'll take
Yeah,
several months, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
yeah. It's just it's too many people there. It will take, I guess, a year or so to get to a yeah level that everybody is kind of immune or enough percentage of the population is immune.
That's just, developed countries, not even talking about underdeveloped
Exactly. Yeah,
years fully vaccinate.
yeah. I've heard that actually in Africa they are doing not that bad. I didn't really read into this, but it's kind of something we should have a look at because maybe being in a developed country doesn't help all the time, right? Maybe something if you have a more also rural societies also probably avoid spreading of a virus as fast as it does in a highly developed country because we kind of travel that much,
Yeah.
meet so many people. uh,
What is an interesting conversation about,
yeah,
I guess, kind of like the downsides of developed countries
yeah,
to diseases or pandemics, things like that.
yeah.
So,
There was a bit. Yeah, there was a bit of a discussion in Germany about this at after the pandemic started, because it's also like the global supply chains kind of break in a or they are risking that they break in a pandemic. And if you would have a more local economy where you have like a production at least of the essentials like food that are like closer by, you wouldn't run out of any of those very essential stuff. So in the last whatever decades, it was always about globalizing production. Maybe it's also something that we should think about cutting back a bit.
yeah, and I think just in terms of sustainability as well, especially in terms of food security and things like that, we really need
Hmm.
to kind of scale back the global uh, thing and kind of go into more local agriculture, local sustainability, and things
Mm.
like that.
Yeah, it would also reduce cost of transportation, energy cost of transportation, and so on. Yeah, yeah. It's all something that the maybe positive side effects of the pandemic.
Well, we can hope. We can hope that we learn something from this, as we can hope
Yeah,
that we learn something from the way that we've lived for the past 200 years.
yeah. This is actually the thing, right? We lived for hundred thousands of years, like humankind, in a sustainable way. It's not like this is impossible to
Yeah,
do.
we know it's possible. We've done it before, and then
Yeah,
just the past few centuries, it's been okay. Okay, the way we've been living is clearly not sustainable.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's a exciting time. There will be a lot of changes, so it will be exciting.
Well, I did want to thank you again for coming here,
Yeah,
Canterbury.
yeah,
I'm sure I'll hopefully be in contact with you again as sometime in the future.
Sure, I hope so too. Yeah, I'm looking forward.